Hey there, this is Phil. Welcome back to the show. I'm Phil Vischer. This is the Phil Vischer Podcast. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, who is pretty in pink.
Thank you.
Very pretty, very
It's very
pink.
springy today.
It is springy.
You know, we've
It's
gone
warm out.
2 months with no snow.
I know, this is...
Makes me so happy.
But it's not global warming.
No.
It's just God loving us more.
God's shining his smiling face.
That's what climate change is. Sky Chitani, who is dangerous in black.
I am back in black.
You're back in black, and you're just back from...
South Carolina.
South Carolina?
Yeah. Shout out to my new friends down in Easley. They were great, very hospitable.
Easily?
Did you pitch the podcast, I hope?
I did not pitch the podcast, but I didn't have to because the pastor pitched the podcast.
Oh,
The
that's
pastor
awesome.
pitched the podcast.
He did.
That's perfect.
And I met a number of listeners who really liked the podcast.
That's fantastic. And we're also here with Dr. Reverend... No, you're not a reverend.
No, but I mean, I could be for the day if you
You
want
could
me to.
Reverend, if I were Reverend for the day. Theon Hill.
Well,
Welcome back.
thank you.
Yeah, friend of the show, been here before, but it's been a couple of years, and Christian thought she was going crazy because she has no recollection of this, but
I did.
She wasn't there that day.
But I'm
So,
here today, and that's
They're
all that counts.
meeting for the first time. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer Podcast starts right here. Oh, we'll talk to Sky.
Hi.
And Christian, too.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. And Theon Hill is here for you. Hi, Theon.
Hello.
Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer Podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer Podcast starts right here. Okay, so we're recording this the morning after the Oscars. So that you can't let that slide.
Just please tell me that I won and make it be real.
That you won the Oscars?
Yes.
You didn't. You didn't win.
But at least you didn't lie to me and tell me I did.
Was your impression positive?
I didn't watch it,
You didn't watch it.
I was traveling.
You were traveling.
but I did catch the highlights.
Theon,
afterwards.
did you watch?
I was following on iPhone updates.
Oh, okay.
But I like Moonlight, so does that mean
Yeah.
it's a general concept? Does that mean
yeah,
I
I've
win?
been wanting
Wait,
to see.
have you seen the movie?
No, I just like Moonlight as the actual.
As
you
a
like,
general
you like the
concept.
light of the moon.
Exactly.
As in by the light.
I haven't seen the
of
movie.
The silvery moon.
Did you see the movie?
I saw La La Land. How many of the best
I saw La La
picture
Land.
films did you see?
I saw Hell or High Water. I saw Arrival.
Yes.
I saw Arrival and La La
I think that's
Land.
it.
I just saw two.
We tried to see Hidden Figures a couple weeks ago, but we
Yeah.
couldn't get in.
I saw Hidden Figures. I saw Fences.
Okay.
Arrival.
Okay.
I did not like Arrival.
But now, okay. You didn't like
I
Arrival?
was a fan of Arrival.
You liked it?
I liked
it was
Arrival.
I
fascinating.
thought it was boring.
I liked
Oh, my
Arrival.
goodness.
Oh, just because the aliens weren't jumping around and shooting
If
stuff.
you were going to name two aliens, Abbott and Costello, I'm expecting to be entertained. And they were boring. Just saying.
Made my wife cry.
They tried to do that twist at the end, the M. Night Shyamalan kind of twist.
Yeah, huh?
Didn't land for me.
What are you talking about? It got a Best Picture nomination. How can you say it didn't work?
They have to fill it out now with a whole bunch of movies to hook all the different audiences in to watch the Oscars. So they put a sci-fi movie in there.
Yeah, okay. Christian, how many
I saw
of the movies?
none of them.
None.
You've seen none
I
of
can't even participate in this conversation. No.
None.
I wanted to.
None.
Does that count?
Okay.
No.
So none of you can comment on how you think Jimmy Kimmel did.
I did watch his opening monologue, like a YouTube clip with that. I thought it was good. I really enjoy his spat with Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Yes.
And that came back over and over again.
I saw
It was-
maybe one other place.
It was
with
funny.
Yeah.
It was funny. My wife had never heard of their spat, so I had to explain it as it was going. Here's why this is so funny and why you shouldn't be feeling bad for Matt Damon. But I thought he was really good,
Yeah.
actually. I thought he struck the right balance because you've got David Letterman on one hand who didn't take it seriously at all and it didn't have any gravitas to it. And then you can go too far trying to kind of kiss up to the institutions. And I thought he struck a nice balance of he's respectful, but he's completely laid back. And he's having fun with it.
It's a hard job.
Personality.
Yeah,
He's
I
got
would
the
think
right
that.
personality for it.
Yeah, I would wonder if he would consider doing it again. Not after how it ended. That was insane.
Well,
Thankfully,
he had
it was
nothing
not
to
his
do with
fault.
that. Yeah. But, it certainly was a little political.
It was a little political. It usually is.
Yeah. It usually is.
It usually is. And no one in the room was upset about any digs at the current president.
No.
I think that's fair to say.
Probably.
They
It
were
was
all-
a very friendly room.
Okay. If I recall, and I could be mistaken,
Yeah.
was there some controversy last year?
Yeah, Oscar So White was
That's
last
right.
year.
It was
But Chris
that-
Rock was the host.
That's right.
Yeah, to try to make up for it.
That's right.
So we got to do something. We got to do
Because
something.
Oscar so white. But this year,
Yeah,
it was a ton of non-white winners.
Right.
They had to make that happen.
Right.
You know, it's time to
Well, that's
nominate.
what. But see, that's exactly. I wonder how much of that is reactionary.
They made changes to Oscar or to the Academy membership, and one of the things was of bumping very old members off the roster sooner, because the old members are almost entirely white.
You can't just add people; you have to bump some off.
Well, to change the makeup, no, you can't add people, but you can also,
Remove them.
yeah.
So did they go to these older folks and say, "Look, we love you. You've been great,
Yeah,
but we need to. The quota's
You
in."
now need to take one for the team.
Right.
And you out. And some of them were quite unhappy. It's like, I'm supposed to be able to vote for life. And you just bumped me off.
So is that the reason why we saw so much more diversity this
I
time
think
around?
there was a shift in the demographic of the Academy intentionally to try to make it more reflective of the work being
Okay,
done.
because I was wondering how that happened so quickly.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. See, shouldn't we be able to do that with the whole country?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Bring the races together
well,
just
then-
by bumping off a few elderly people.
Well, you know, if that's the goal, then it seems like the Trump administration is pushing the wrong people out.
You think?
We should just take boatloads of old white people and move them up to Canada or something.
Well, and they don't even start with the church and which leaders in the white church we listened to this election.
Oh, no.
Here we go.
The ones over 70 primarily.
I don't think too many church leaders were listened to, period.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeffries? Dobson?
Jeffers? Is it Jeffers or Jeffries?
Jeff
Falwell?
Falwell?
See,
Jr.?
I don't think any of them have all that much influence anymore.
Graham.
Falwell called it
Junior.
right, though.
Franklin Graham. How many rallies did Franklin Graham have? A gazillion?
That
He had a
it was like a road trip. Like,
Yeah, he did a
covered-
road trip. Yeah, and it wasn't openly partisan, but it was kind of implicitly
The reason
partisan.
why I'm not sure they have that much influence is because I think those voices were reinforcing the same exact message that their audience was already getting absorbed from the media that they
Yeah,
engage.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But you
Right.
didn't see, there were a lot
But
of...
some of that media is them.
Yeah, but
Some of it.
You know, if you're saturated in Fox News 24/7, and then
Yeah.
Franklin Graham comes along and basically reinforces the same message with an ichthus on it,
Yeah.
how much influence is he really having? the test is how many Christian leaders who were not aligned with Trump had an influence on people who were, and that was apparently negligible, at least in the evangelical white community.
Well, interestingly enough, the evangelical leaders that were not aligned with Trump got a lot of heat.
Russell Moore.
Yeah.
Russell Moore being one of
Would
them.
be a fine example.
Right.
Okay. So that's all we've got about the Oscars
Yeah.
because no one watched
Well,
it.
yeah, first of all, how did we got into political from the Oscars? How did that happen so fast?
Did you see any movies this year?
Yes, but they were not the current ones.
Oh,
I mean, the one that we're talking
yeah,
about.
Right. Because you typically don't like those sorts of movies.
Not at all. I have been immersed in my own
Oh, right.
moving
You
and
move
renovation,
and
and I'm out of money and had no
but
time.
not for the whole year.
It's been going on 11 months,
Oh,
I'll tell
so that's pretty much the whole
Going
year.
back to the movies, I
Yeah.
was happy to see that Best Documentary went to O.J. Made in America.
you were happy to see that?
Uh-oh.
I'm
Here
not,
we go.
it was a great documentary.
Yeah.
It was pretty
And I
amazing.
haven't been able to see it yet, but I was just really cheering for the James Baldwin documentary. I Am Not Your
What is-
Negro.
Oh, yeah.
Because I love me some Baldwin.
The
I
only
got a
one.
piece coming out on him for Faithfully
Why
magazine
do you like
soon.
him?
James Baldwin? His writings taught me what it meant to be black in America as I was coming of age as a college student. His
Really?
book, The Fire Next Time, is just spot on.
The Fire Next Time.
It's modeled after, like, it was the flood. And he's like, if we don't get these divisions in America together, it's going to be the fire next time.
So that's the point. And so what's his recommendation for getting these
By Kevlar.
together?
Well, he's writing in the 60s, and he's rejecting in some ways the Malcolm X philosophy. And what he does beautifully is he combines the rage of a Malcolm X. Like, he's angry, but he also has the integrationist and love ethic of a king. So,
That's an interesting combination.
Now, one of your areas of study is rhetoric.
Yes.
Right? It's the use of speech to.
we didn't give his bio. We should do that.
Theon Hill is an assistant professor of communication at Wheaton College, where he researches and teaches on the intersections of race, religion, and society, with an emphasis on rhetoric. But when you tell people that, I really enjoy rhetoric.
Yeah.
What percentage of people know what that means?
My mom has always thought it means that I teach people how to lie. Which it's not, but I teach people that rhetoric...
That's advertising.
Yes. Now we're going to talk about Mad Men. Anyway, rhetoric is the art of persuasion as it surfaces in society.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Could you have a meeting with our president?
Well, would you say he is a master of rhetoric or
Yes.
a...
I would say he's the master of it in a very Machiavellian sense.
Does he know he is, or is it purely accidental?
Yeah.
I think he knows he is.
Who,
I think he's
who
much.
are we talking about? Our
President-
president?
President Trump.
Our president.
What's brilliant about President Trump is he makes it seem like he has no style and he's always shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what he's doing at all. I think he's brilliant. He wants to seem
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm unprepared. I've not thought about this at all. But those are very calculated, even when he's dishonest. I think it's very calculated dishonesty. I think they know exactly what they're doing at times.
What do you think about, because this is...
I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse.
Oh, it definitely makes me feel worse.
Well, it's the crazy or crazy like a fox thing. Which is he?
I'm not. I don't know yet. Because sometimes I've been in your camp and I've thought, okay, this is shrewd. This is calculated. There's other times where I think he just has no idea. No idea. Like, I'll give you one example. There was a press conference he held with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes, yes.
Oh, we've all seen it.
You saw that? And he got a question, I don't know, about
The two-state solution.
And he's like, two-state, one-state, whatever they want. And I'm like, it was obvious from his responses, he has no
He has
idea
no
what
idea
he's
he's
talking
standing
about.
in dog poo up to his knees
Right.
on that topic.
Here's my philosophy, honestly.
Honestly.
He is
Be honest with us,
a
Christian.
smart man. He's a very, very smart, brilliant man in a lot of ways, in communication and in finance and business. He's a very, very smart man. But he knows what he knows well. What he doesn't know, he just thinks he does and wings it. And where that is concerned, he really truly hasn't delved deeply enough into it to know what he doesn't know. There is no way he has a depth of understanding in Middle Eastern history that he needs in order to make a statement like that.
I agree with you.
I
but
completely, yeah.
I agree with you, but here's the difference. There are lots of people in our culture and in our church and in America that are ignorant about all sorts of things. I'm ignorant on tons of areas I don't have any expertise or knowledge or reading.
Like what?
Well, give me some time. I'll come over there.
Okay.
No, but the difference is Donald Trump, not only is he ignorant about a whole lot of things, which, fine, we've had ignorant leaders before in various
Yeah.
areas, but they have people around them to help them. You know, that's the whole point of a cabinet and a team around the president. The difference is Donald Trump has the self-discipline and self-control of an incontinent terrier.
Yes.
Like, he has no ability.
What did you just call our president?
You heard me. An incontinent terrier.
Well, you didn't now. For the record, you didn't call him that. You called his ability of self-control
Right.
relative.
No, I'm
It's
pretty
still
sure
not
he
good.
said he has the same as.
He has no impulse control.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the
Yeah.
part that frightens me. When you combine profound ignorance with a lack of self-discipline and control, that's frightening for the most powerful office in the world.
Okay, Theon.
sir.
Expert in rhetoric. Okay, there's our president, current president. I don't know if you've met him. He's interesting.
I've not met him.
There is the him that speaks out of his brain, and then there is the him that is forced to read the teleprompter.
Right.
Very different messages come out when he's reading the teleprompter. So for something like, all this pressure, we need the president to condemn anti-Semitism.
Right.
We have to have him condemn anti-Semitism. He's never done that extemporaneously, but suddenly he reads a teleprompter statement that condemns anti-Semitism.
Yes, of course.
Should that count? Because it's very clear that he's never talked like that off the cuff, and the things he's passionate about just come out.
Right.
So if the only time, and this is my theory, if the only time he's ever said it is when he was reading something that someone else told him to read, there's no evidence that he believes it.
Well, there's also situations, rhetorically speaking, where my word choice is going to be careful.
Yes.
So if I'm saying something that's really sensitive, I want to make sure that I don't mistake a word, because I know that anything I say that's out of line could be taken in a different context. And you understand that it's like, once I say it, it's out of my control.
As he campaigned, did he give evidence that he was concerned about saying things that could be taken out of context?
Not at all, and I think that's exactly why he had such appeal.
Yeah.
Like, he said, I am he was able to craft himself as an anti-establishment. I mean, who was it? I think it was Sean Hannity who described him as a blue-collar billionaire. It's like, that doesn't exist.
It's an oxymoron.
Yes, exactly. But I think that there's like notion of a rhetorical persona. I want you to perceive me a certain way, so I dress, I act, I respond a certain way.
Right.
And that's exactly what Trump does very well.
What Trump did, and I think Obama did this as well, when he was running in 2008, remember everywhere he went under his podium it said change.
Yes.
Right? And you just look at him and you go, yeah, that's change, right?
different.
This is different.
This is different.
This is definitely change. He embodied the message that he
But Trump
was
is the same thing.
Trump did the exact same thing.
Look at him and this is different.
His message was blow it up, anti-establishment, and you look at him and you go, you are unlike the establishment for sure in every way.
Right.
And people, that authenticity spoke to people.
Yes.
And they and you look at recent elections, and it's usually the candidate who is most attuned to their core message, their branding, and the candidate that is best on television that always wins.
Why have other more populist, less, equally unqualified in the traditional sense candidates like a Ron Paul or like
Ross Perot?
Ross Perot. Yeah, I'm thinking of those two guys. Ross Perot, Ron Paul, kind of similar, generated some heat because they, I'm just going to tell the American people like it is. That was Ross Perot. He reminded us of the Purdue Chicken Man.
Yeah.
But they don't get traction. Because at the end of the day, of course, we're going to hire someone real from the establishment. And then this year we just threw all that out the window. Why, Theon?
Trump is a master of using the media to his advantage.
Yeah.
And if you see Ron Paul or Ross Perot still played by normative practices of decorum, this is how you should act if you're running for office. Trump threw those out the window, and it became his advantage because he was defiant, saying, I'm not adapting to political correctness. I'm draining the swamp. And he said things that we don't expect politicians to say. And so he constantly stays in the media in a way that he's allowed to craft a message to resonate with a particular group of voters.
I want to add one other piece. Maybe this is going to be controversial, but Ross Perot was not running for president after 8 years of the first African-American president.
Yes.
And he wasn't running for president in a post-9/11 ISIS world. And I think Trump...
Can I add one more thing?
Trump played off the fears of a lot of Americans about a black president and about Islam.
Can I
and
add
he
one?
used that to his
Can I add
advantage.
one more thing?
Yeah.
Ross Perot was not a reality TV star. With a hit show for 10 years before he ran for TV.
I honestly feel like we have gotten addicted to reality TV life and to live, watching what's going to happen next and this whole unscripted
I'm
thing.
waiting for Trump to present his cabinet candidates with a rose.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. But you know what? I don't know if you guys feel this, and I would love to know. I'm exhausted.
That was a Bachelor reference.
I'm exhausted with the chaos and exhausted with the uncertainty, and I crave now the decorum and the what I would expect my leaders to behave like.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just like, can we please just calm down and all behave like adults?
Have you considered just not looking?
Somebody I know recently said they've just stopped reading the news, watching the news, and they said their life is so much better. And I'm not sure that's the right
It's
prescription
hard for me
everybody.
because I feel like we need to care. Like, I feel like, one thing that's great about this election is I'm a middle American, Midwestern, middle-aged
You sure are.
white woman,
You're all
right?
of those
I'm all of
things.
things middle
And
things.
stylish.
Thanks. And
an
I,
award-winning voiceover actress.
I am, thank you. So people just in my field of influence or whatever mostly are being moms, and they're super busy and they don't have time to care about stuff. And it's not just me. And I do think it's important that we think about what's happening and we engage.
Have we been encouraged to panic about what is going to happen in Washington? Either, if I stop paying attention, either they're going to come for my guns or they're going to come for my health care.
I have been encouraged to pay attention because I want to make a difference. I want to be thoughtful and I want to think about who I elect and how I can stop this madness.
But Theon, do you think we're giving Washington more power than they actually have?
I think when we see the issues over refugees and undocumented immigrants, I think it's very easy to assume that, oh, they can't do this, even as we see families being broken up. I mean, right after the refugee ban was announced, I was out there at O'Hare because I recognize that we do have agency. Politicians will respond if we stand up. So I was out there marching, saying, let's go, because we have to respond if our democracy is going to survive.
Marco Rubio, I saw tweeted today, the Republican Congress, all the Congress people are home in their districts and they're meeting and have these town halls.
Not meeting with
or
the
not
town
meeting, but
halls.
they're having town halls and meeting with their constituents, and there's a lot of angry people who are worried about the healthcare reforms. And he tweeted out today to his fellow Republican colleagues that these upset people and these worried people are real. We need to take them seriously. This isn't fake. And so it's having an effect. People speaking out has an effect. So we do need to be informed and aware. And,
So we need to pay attention.
Yeah, but
Yes.
we also need to not become so absorbed or have our well-being and the posture of our soul affected every time there's
Right.
an alert on our phone from some news agency.
Do you know who Garrett Kell is?
I do not.
No,
Preacher, right?
He's the pastor of the Del Rey Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. He wrote a piece that went out on Piper's blog, on John
The
Piper's
Desiring God?
The Desiring God blog, yes. And the piece is titled, "It's a Wonderful Time to be a Christian. 5 Reasons for Optimism in America."
Fabulous.
Yeah, so here's what this Virginian Baptist preacher says. America is facing turbulent times. Political unrest is unceasing. The racial divide is deepening. Fear and frustration swirl frantically. This leads to only one logical conclusion. It's a wonderful time to be a Christian. Christians are uniquely equipped to thrive in tumultuous times, not because we are great, but because our God is. And he has 5 reasons he thinks it's a wonderful time to be a Christian in America. Number 1, people, and this one might be up for debate. People are intrigued by real Christians. In other words, there's a stereotype of Christians, but then you actually meet one. Whether it be through media stories, political reports, or comedy sets, evangelical Christians are characterized as whiny, entitled children. We are perceived as bigoted hate mongers looking down on others while blinded to our own shortcomings. We are seen as outdated, overrated, and irrelevant. Yet, when someone meets an actual Christian these days, they often are intrigued. Do you buy that? I would use the Chick-fil-A example of the CEO of Chick-fil-A getting to know the gay rights activist and becoming good friends. And, or even my experience with some of my atheist friends, they've actually said, okay, you're not like we expected.
Right.
Is that a minority experience?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of Christians out there that would take issue with his definition of a real Christian, right? So it's kind of like facts and alternative facts.
Yeah.
There's Christians and there's alternative Christians.
Yeah.
So who are the real ones?
It's the, I believe that is called the good Irishman fallacy, which is when you say, any good Irishman would do this. And you say, there's an Irishman not doing that. That's not a good Irishman. So you kind of redefine it and say, well, that's not a good Christian. Having said that, though, I've pushed back on people because there is a biblical definition of what a Christ-like life looks like, and it's Christ. So, and then you say, okay, Westboro Baptist, are they good Christians? I can say qualitatively, empirically, no. And I can support that by the life of Christ. Okay, so that defies the good Irishman.
But here's your slippery slope. Now we're fighting back and forth, and you guys are just looking at us like it's a tennis match.
Oh, it's fun.
It's okay.
Fun.
The problem with that is there are Christians out there who would say, if you vote Democrat, then you can't. I actually had a conversation with somebody at our church about this. If you vote Democrat, you cannot be a Christian because Jesus would not vote for any party that supported abortion. Period.
Yeah. And then you said, can you show me that verse?
Well, Jesus doesn't want babies to die.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, it becomes so messy by which issues do you put forward as being the definitive ones.
Can I give his number 2 now? That was number 1. Real Christians will surprise you if you actually get to know one. Okay, that's number 1. We consider that arguable.
Well, I agree with him in the sense that
if you met Jesus.
Yes. When you meet people who are sincerely following Jesus in the culture, hopefully
Okay.
that you are surprised by that.
Okay, number 2. Christians have the answer for racial reconciliation.
Is it locked away somewhere? Have they not shared this?
No, and then he actually calls out to white brothers and sisters. Ought to show.
Wait. Is he Anglo?
Yes,
How do you know?
I saw a picture of him.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, white brothers and sisters ought to show love by learning about the deep roots of social, institutional, and communal injustices that affect many today. Read the scriptures alongside historical books that recount the black experience in America. Talk about what you are reading with African American friends and include other minority friends in the discussion. Don't be defensive or quick to make excuses. And then he turns around and says, black brothers and sisters, I encourage you toward a resilient faith. Many of your forefathers endured oppression, were denied membership in white churches, and grew despite a lack of access to theological education. We need to see that resilience now. The world does not have an answer like Jesus. They have no power and no lasting solutions. But we have an opportunity to show them the unity that Jesus prayed for and purchased with his blood.
So he's saying this is a great time because we have an opportunity.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the church is availing itself of that opportunity.
To show racial reconciliation? Yeah.
I mean, you can always say there's
I
opportunity.
was wanting the news article that I just read about the Muslims going to the Jewish cemeteries to help them clean
Yeah.
and fix them up. Was also going to say, and the Christians were there too. I was sad that we weren't there represented.
Could have been
There
Christians.
might have
Maybe
been
it just wasn't
some,
reported.
But it wasn't as shocking.
Right.
Because, Muslims that, woof.
They're at
right
literal
down there
war.
with atheists.
They're at literal.
They're right
war.
down there with atheists and reporters.
Mike Pence went to the cemetery and helped clean
Yeah,
up.
he
at one
did.
point, so.
Theon.
Well, I think we have a moment where, sure, we have a great opportunity, but having an opportunity to fix a problem means that we've correctly diagnosed the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the challenges that we still speak about racial reconciliation in strictly individual terms. There's communal sins and we don't even have the language within contemporary evangelicalism to talk about a communal sin and what communal responsibility looks like in rectifying that.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Hey, that's how far we are from having the language.
Enlighten me.
So when we think about communal sins, it's not just an individual being racist to another individual.
Yeah.
It can be a society being racist against a group of people.
Institution.
Yes,
Yeah.
a system. So you think of the term systemic racism. And so we've talked about this, but we don't understand that systemic racism requires those who benefit from the system are equally either complicit or responsible to help eradicate that system.
Like how we want Fox News to defend that CNN is real news,
Hey.
right?
And Shep Smith
And
did
Shep
it.
Smith did it.
God
I know.
bless
God love
Shep
him.
Smith.
But that's sort of what you're talking about.
You're becoming complicit.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, I didn't say it, but somehow
Right.
I'm not responsible.
I'm not
you
saying
benefit
it.
from this.
Right. That's communal.
And a lot of
Got it.
American evangelicalism anyway is so individualistic.
Yes,
right. So
without a
we
doubt.
don't inherently have the theological framework to think about systemic issues like this, whether it's race or other issues.
Of course.
So, yeah, we're at a deficit there.
What do you say to someone who says, gee, I really don't feel like I benefited from mistreatment of African Americans? I grew up in Iowa. There aren't even any black people in Iowa. We have a lot of Latinos.
Do you consider yourself a son of privileged upbringing?
Son of privilege. I like the ring to that. Ish.
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 Right.
But I would see it as more economic. I guess socioeconomic. It's small town Iowa, but my dad and my grandfather were both executives.
I mean,
and
you
fairly
had
well
a
paid.
lot of privileges that many,
Yeah.
many, many did not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, are you saying it's my fault?
I'm saying it's a systemic problem.
Well, this one of the textbook examples that we give is you don't necessarily. So what I would tell my brother from Iowa, if that was the scenario that we're going to go
Yeah,
with, is,
say that you knew someone who
Yeah.
grew up in Iowa.
yeah, you don't necessarily have to feel privileged in order for you to benefit from privilege.
To be privileged?
Yes. So an instance is if they can tell from my name that I'm a minority candidate for a job, my chances for getting that job go down about 50% compared to my white counterparts. That's not something that white counterpart would ever know, but they're still benefiting from that reality.
Yeah. That's why I was trying to change my name to Chris Rock as an act of racial reconciliation.
Naturally.
We'll get back to that. Number 3, that was number 2. We can solve racial reconciliation.
We got it.
Great opportunity. Number 3, God has brought unreached peoples to us.
For now. They're on their way out.
Regardless of your political views, if you are a Christian, your theological convictions should spur you to action. What would happen if Christians opened their homes and their lives to the strangers who live next to them?
They'd get murdered.
Showing Christ-like hospitality to Muslim neighbors is essential for them to understand the true message of Christianity. I do not say this lightly. We are positioned to fulfill the Great Commission. I don't know about that part.
Jesus said
Really.
to go
Not
and
everyone
make
is
disciples, not bring them over here.
Well, you could go, yeah.
I'm playing devil's advocate,
Oh, good
obviously.
job.
I actually heard that argument recently.
Nice wardrobe for it, too.
Wow, you did
I did
really?
hear that argument, yeah.
Jesus said go,
Yeah, somebody was
Not invite?
somebody who was supportive of Trump's
and they
refugee
came to
plan.
your door, and you did not let them in.
But those
Isn't
are
that-
people in need. That's not Matthew 28 and making disciples. Go and
Oh,
make
okay.
disciples, right?
Okay.
So their argument was, we're supposed to send missionaries overseas
Yeah.
to go make disciples over there. We're not supposed to bring them here and have them
Okay.
in our neighborhoods
Well,
and schools.
Franklin Graham said the idea of bringing refugees to America is not a biblical issue.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't say anything about specifically about bringing Syrian
Hey.
refugees to the United States of
The
America.
Good Samaritan didn't take that guy into his house. He took him to the inn and paid someone else to deal with him.
You haven't heard that.
I have heard that argument. Absolutely. So yeah, okay. Let's take some money. We'll pay Turkey and Jordan and the United Arab
send
Emirates.
them
They
a-
can handle the
I'll
refugees,
send them
but
a
they're not
shoebox
coming to my
full of
house.
toothpaste.
In the immortal words of DeMarcus Cousins, Lord, give me the strength.
I don't agree with any of these arguments.
Oh, of course. I'm just
obviously.
saying, it's just
Obviously.
hard to
Obviously,
hear.
But yes, these are
Theon,
crazy things.
Theon,
I'm
what do you
hearing.
think?
Honestly, I think we are in love with security so much that that is blinding us from love.
That's right.
If we understand what's happening in the Good Samaritan story, the key there is that he's making himself vulnerable to serve someone who's in need. And the whole narrative there is in response to, who's my neighbor? Whoever's in need. And you do whatever you can, even if it inconveniences you, which means opening up our homes, which means...
But what if they might hurt you?
That's the whole point of the story.
guess what? If we are Christians, it's okay. Because I have a sovereign God whom, even if the very worst thing that happens to me and they kill me, I'm going to be in a better place. And let's just say they hurt me. What did Paul say? That the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the joy which shall be revealed in me.
Amen.
The world is a perfectly safe place for those who belong
Reverend.
to Christ.
Hey.
Reverend.
But you've diagnosed it exactly right. So many Christians, whether they're fake or real, however you want to define them, in the United States, are captivated by fear.
Yes.
And,
Well,
and
and
you
I-
cannot love when you're captivated
I
by
would
fear.
go a step further and say our idol has become security.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
we are
That's why we have to live in the suburbs where
we
we
are
all live.
absolutely worshiping security and safety and comfort.
And it's an illusion.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
And I stand guilty. I'm not saying other people are guilty.
But how do you
Here's the key thing. How many refugees have ever, from these areas have ever perpetrated a terrorist attack? Since 1980, it's been zero.
You're more likely to be killed by a peanut than by a Muslim.
Is it a Muslim peanut?
No.
Is it halal?
Oh my.
You know,
I think we should outlaw
I'm
peanuts.
more likely to be killed by a peanut than by a terrorist?
Yes.
Is that what you just said?
Yes, I did.
You know, you're more likely to be killed by a vending machine than to win the lottery, but we still play the lottery.
And we still allow vending machines.
I know.
is there a number 5?
Yeah, we're on number 4.
Oh.
That was just number 3. Number 4, persecution is purifying us. Jesus promised that following him would be costly.
Wait a minute. He thinks we're being persecuted?
I'm not done yet. Just bear with me. Right. Jesus promised that following him would be costly. He warned, if they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. Ostracism and affliction have marked the church since its beginnings. True?
Yeah, in general.
Okay. Yet, the United States has been largely spared this common experience of believers.
Unless you're not white.
Sure. Oh, okay. Well, we're writing from a white perspective. Many minority groups have tragically endured oppression, but as a whole, the church in America has known freedom to worship Jesus.
I
mean, on my side of the tracks, it's going to be a very different experience going by. We were under constant surveillance from Massa.
I mean, you study like the hush harbors that the slaves endured, so they could actually worship free. I mean, it's remarkable stories. So we tend to overlook that side of it.
Okay. In fact, public worship has not only been allowable but advantageous. Church-going opened doors for business, made one appear trustworthy, and was required for social acceptability. But the tide is changing, and as it does, Christians are experiencing increasing pressure from the world to conform or be conformed. I think Christian is being used as white Christian. It's Christian.
Yeah. Okay, but...
This pressure will expose some so-called Christians. Once again, we have so-called...
Just like so-called media or so-called judge.
As imposters. Oh, my goodness. But for true believers, it will produce maturity. So persecution produces maturity. That's biblical, right? Reverend Hill?
It can produce maturity.
Yeah.
Depending on how we respond to it.
It's purifying. It can be purifying. But he hasn't made the case that there's persecution happening. I'd argue that there's probably more persecution in the United States toward religious groups who are non-Christian than Christians. So is it purifying Muslims?
We built a Muslim prayer room at the Orlando airport with tax dollars.
Keep going.
I thought it was an interfaith prayer room.
No, it was a Muslim prayer room because it had to have the markings on the walls for which way is Mecca. And there was already just a prayer room. There was already a chapel. Okay. That's why Franklin Graham got so bent out of shape. Because we were... Number 5. Ready?
Cinco.
This is the last one. Why is it a great time to be a Christian? Because we are closer to seeing Jesus than ever before.
Of course.
Tomorrow I will be closer to seeing Jesus than ever before.
I think that's probably always been true for all of history.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that one's not so hot. Okay, so which ones of these do we really agree with?
Here's my summary.
They're kind of cliche, to be honest.
I tell my children all the time that basically going through life is like being in the Army's basic training or the Marines boot camp.
Yeah.
Right? In order for a soldier to be developed in mind and body, they have to go through that experience.
Screaming in their face.
And every single negative or horrible thing that happens, and I've been thinking about this during this whole past, election and now where we are, there is a lot of good that can be had in this situation, even if I just take it personally, just like you said, using discipline to not be obsessed with the news and try to find that balance between, being involved and informed and not being obsessed, that is something that God can use to develop spiritual character in me. So on a tiny level, there's that opportunity. Right. On a big level, as a group of Christians, we have an opportunity to learn a lot of things. We have to learn about racial reconciliation, learn about how to serve others and reach out to refugees. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity.
Right. Theon.
I was just going to say, I think ultimately, would I agree with Garrett's argument that it's a wonderful time to be a Christian? Yes, if we're willing to make ourselves insecure and uncomfortable for the cause of Christ. But I'm not sure how the American church...
risky.
I don't know how the American church is answering that question.
If you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat.
Isn't that a book?
Yeah, it is.
Is that a Max Lucado book?
No, I think it's... Is it?
No.
Ortberg.
Yes.
It's more of an Ortberg book. So, Theon, you're at a college, so you're dealing with a lot of young people.
Yes.
We haven't had a representative for young people on the show recently. What are you observing among the college students and how they're responding to all this? And you don't have to get super specific because we don't want to out anybody.
Right.
But what's the vibe on campus and what are students wrestling with?
Well, there's a lot of our students who are questioning what's going on in our nation. They've never quite experienced a moment of uncertainty like this. So, I mean, let's just say anyone has friends or has a friend who's an undocumented immigrant. It's like, what's going to happen to this friend? What's going to happen to this person's family? If they know any refugees. I mean, we're here in Wheaton, Carroll Stream, where there's a lot of refugees. We have organizations like World Relief. So there's a concern about what's going on here and what's going to happen. So there's that, but there's also how do we relate to people who have differences than us and different political opinions.
I hear that you're doing some roommate reconciliation, apparently.
Well, we're having some fun. We're having some good conversations on campus because it's not just that we've always had political disagreements.
Right.
That's not new.
Part of college.
But we've never had disagreements for this generation that are so deeply entrenched.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I move forward with you when you have a completely different view on whether security or loving someone who's a refugee is more important? Because
Yeah.
that's just not something we can agree to disagree about. So how do we interact with one another
Yeah.
when we might have serious
And
differences?
are you seeing any kind of generational shift with, because 20 years ago, we were pretty much all just Republicans.
Right.
In the evangelical church. Younger evangelicals seem to be questioning that, assumption more and more. Do you see that wave shifting, and is that creating some of this conflict?
Yes, of course. So I would say we see this in a couple of areas. Number one, how we define life. That's one of the key areas. So life is not just inside of the womb, but life also matters for the brother and sister in the trailer park or the brother and sister down on Inglewood. So we've seen a greater definition of life. We're also seeing terms like justice exist alongside of holiness. So it's not just that we can't do this, but we should also fight for this.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that is even materializing in how do we think of God? Is God simply a judge, or is God also a liberator?
Right.
And so all of these different conversations about who God is, what he demands of us, and how that is enacted in our Christian life is something that I'm seeing our students wrestle with.
So that complicates political engagement.
Exactly.
It's not so cut and dry.
Extremely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about the arguments that I've had a few people push back and say, yes, we need to help the poor. Yes, we need to do social justice, but that's for the church, not the government. So don't let the government do that. Us churches, we need to do all of that.
I always find that argument amusing, especially when people are voting for a president over a Supreme Court judge. I think it's a little inconsistent with how we advocate.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point.
So in other words, they're making their choice for president because of their concern about the Supreme Court, which will determine what the government does to make us more or less Christian.
Exactly. If we're called to be salt and light, that's
Yeah.
going to have implications for the society in which we live.
Yeah.
It's going to impact how we advocate, how we push our government to do things, because although we understand that this earth is never going to be heaven, we understand that in our advocacy for certain issues, we're giving society a glimpse of what heaven's like.
Wait, say that one more
Sorry,
time.
you just blew Christian's
No,
mind.
that was so good. Say that one more time.
We understand that this world is never going to be heaven, but we know that in our advocacy for certain issues, we give society a glimpse of what heaven's going to be like.
That almost going to bring me to tears.
Let's just
Preach
pause.
it, Reverend.
Let's just pause. So what was the last time we talked to you was 2 years ago.
That's right.
And Trump was just a twinkle in our eyes. We
even announced.
We had no idea what was coming. What was the last year like for you as an African American in a largely white, mostly conservative context? What went on for you over the last year?
It's been difficult because I listen to many of my brothers and sisters who are near and dear to my heart justify supporting an individual to me who used racism, xenophobia, sexism to mobilize a base. And I had to listen to justifications for this. And so for me, the primary challenge was, how do I preserve my brothers and sisters' humanity when they're doing something that I fiercely disagree with? So for me, it's not just a matter of talking to our students on how to work through these things. I've had to work through these questions myself.
Right.
Great. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because one of the biggest things I want to ask you is, how in the world, practically, can you give me some steps or a handbook of how to have conversations with people that are diametrically opposed to what I think is right?
Yeah. So the first thing is, what is my purpose in engaging in a discussion with this person?
Win.
Exactly. No, that's how we enter. I have to defeat you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I might have someone who's on the other end of a political issue than me. If I'm entering that conversation, I'm entering to understand his or her perspective.
So your motivation from the very beginning is to listen and understand.
Exactly. And I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to invite them to challenge my perspective. I'm going to make myself vulnerable to their point of view. It's like, you could say something that changes my mind. But in the midst of that, even when they say things that I find seriously offensive, I have to learn how to love them. Otis Moss Jr., who was a colleague of Dr. King, said recently, he's like, if Jesus was on the cross and literally says to the people, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he's being crucified. How much more are we responsible to love those who we feel are transgressing against us by their worldview?
But what if they're also believers, and then there's different rules? Like, you know, if you disagree with them, you have to cast them out of your fellowship and not associate with
Actually,
them.
that's not quite.
Am I
what
getting
Paul
that
said.
right?
No.
Tell me what goes through your head. Tell me what you say to yourself when someone says something so abhorrent to you,
So
and
let's
you
just
want to
say-
treat them in a loving way. What goes through your head?
So let's just say someone.
The very first thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That goes to your head.
Well, you know,
Let's
this is
go
a
for
family
the
podcast.
This is
second
this is
thing.
why the very first thing that goes through Trump's head is what he ends up saying or tweeting,
Right.
which is a lack of self-control.
What if it isn't? What if this is actually moderated?
That's the debate.
What
That's
we
the
get.
Theon thinks it's more calculated. I
Yeah,
think it's
right,
more
right.
impulsive.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
I would say the thing that goes through my head that I can say is there's probably a number of issues that I'm wrong as well,
Okay.
and God still bears with me. And so I need to have mercy and humility as I interact with this person. Now, that's a battle because sometimes I hear things that I find are the most ridiculous comments I've ever heard.
And so does your temperature rise and you
Yes.
start to feel angry? Because that happens to me.
Yes.
Okay, so then what do you do to tamp that down?
I try to remember a time when I said something stupid and I believed something completely unbiblical. And I think God still loved me. So what excuse do I have to not continue loving this person? And I understand that even in having that attitude of love, I make them comfortable to be open about it. And if a person's going to be open about how they believe, that actually gives me an opportunity to speak into their lives. Some of the students who I found that we had disagreements with, that act of actually having open dialogues created a pathway for them to speak into my life and for me to speak into their life.
So by listening to them and opening a conversation and not being afraid, you invited them into your life, and then they invited you into theirs, and there was a mutual respect that fostered real conversation, not like angry.
Of course. And
Conversation.
I will say I can't do that with everyone. Not everyone wants to have a serious dialogue. And so there's some brothers and sisters that's like, it's better for us not to talk about this issue.
Right.
Because all you want to do is proselytize me. And I'm not having that.
Which
right
is
now.
why engaging on social media is so unproductive.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay. I wrote a blog post after the election, which
Okay.
may have been ill-advised.
Who advised you to?
The first thought in his head.
But it was basically the white church has some explaining to do as to why we so largely, overwhelmingly sided with the candidate who was seen, right or wrong, as racist, xenophobic, misogynist. And since the majority of the global church is now brown and no longer white, we're really putting ourselves in an indefensible position. And I got a fair amount of pushback
I would imagine you did.
on that, with a lot of white privilege put in air quotes and libtard and all
Yes,
sorts
of
of
course.
things. And to point out, actually, I voted Republican almost my entire adult life until this happened.
Right.
But so here's what I tried to point out is, why is it that 80% of white evangelicals supported someone that 90% of black evangelicals opposed? And what it came down to is, and I just want to read a response I got from someone and just get your reaction to this.
Sure.
There's a very large segment of Christians, this is not me talking, this is
Right.
someone who was offended by me, who have felt, because I said there are many minority evangelicals who feel betrayed by the majority
Okay.
in this election.
Yes.
And there are quotes of black evangelical leaders and Hispanic evangelical leaders who have said as much. And this was the response. There are a large segment of Christians who have felt betrayed for many years by the black Christian church, which often excoriates conservative black Christians and continually votes for candidates who support abortion and have contempt for Jesus. So if my choice is to please God or to appease black Christians, I will always choose the former. And that brings up abortion.
Yes.
Which is this thing that we've put up, kind of on a pedestal as the litmus test of, are you with Jesus or against Jesus? The white evangelical church, abortion is our thing.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly when it started, but
It started around
I know when abortion
Yeah.
started.
No, I mean
It became our thing around 84,
around
85.
84. Yeah.
Why didn't it become such a big deal in the black church? And how do you respond when you're confronted by, how do you not disqualify any candidate who is in favor of abortion?
Can I push back on that? I think there's the assumption that it was never a big deal in the black church. And if you trace back to its early days, the black church actually mobilized against abortion largely before the white church did.
Really?
Yes. It was in the 80s when the black church, I can give you quotes where Jesse Jackson and other black leaders in the 70s saying this is going to be black genocide. But what happens? The political right absorbs abortion as their issue. And that's also in the same time that Reagan's policies, which in some ways were hurtful to black Americans in different capacities. And it's saying there's no room for you in this debate. And so it became so aligned with the political right that the black community is like, well, this is not an issue that we're going to champion, because to champion this is going to be to champion other policies which are juxtaposed, which are held alongside of it that we find to be harmful to our community.
Okay.
Well, and then that gets to the point we've talked about previously on the podcast, and we talked about at our church, which is if you look at the policy positions of a lot of African American evangelicals and the policy positions of many white evangelicals, they're not that different.
That is spot on.
The difference is in priority. As you put it, a lot of white evangelicals put abortion at the top of that list, and a lot of African Americans evangelicals would put a different issue or set of issues maybe ahead of abortion. But it's a difference of priority, not a difference of values.
Right.
And what we've allowed to happen is rather than standing united as the church around all of these things, we've allowed ourselves to be defined first and foremost by political affiliation rather than our commitment to one another and to Christ.
Right.
I mean, imagine what would happen if evangelicals across the spectrum, from Hispanic, African American, Asian American, Anglo American, if all of them came together and rallied together and said, we will stand united around whatever these set of issues are.
Yeah.
The political establishment from both parties would have to stop and listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's our own disunity that's allowed this to happen.
If we had to pick, if you were building that platform, I don't know, 4 or 5 central issues, abortion is in there.
But it's in there, but it's wrapped into a larger
one
ethic
of the things
of life.
that I think is so interesting is we do hold up abortion as this litmus test for these things, but at the bottom of that is sanctity of life.
Yes.
And there are so many other issues that, let's take genocide, for example, or, we can go on down the line, where the sanctity of life, is, black youth right now. It's just as sacred as, the life of an unborn child, right?
Yes.
Why don't we focus on that?
Do we have a problem when we can be accused of caring about people only until they're born, and that accusation rings true?
I think, that gets thrown out there a lot, and I don't think it's entirely fair. Because I think there's a lot of Christians who care about the unborn, who care greatly about the born as well.
Yeah.
The difference is we haven't mobilized politically around issues as much beyond birth.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's the dilemma.
And I would just say the church, and you can see this even along racial lines, is there's a difference in focus between distributive justice and retributive justice. So distributive justice is this notion of we need to make justice so that there could be equality in education, equal employment. So we need to try to ensure justice. So we have to give justice.
Yeah.
Retributive justice is going to be punishing. And so we want to stop this from happening. We want to keep the drug dealers off the street. And if you consider the racial divisions in the American church, there's a dual focus on one church is by and large going to focus on distributive justice. The other is going to focus on retributive justice. Wow. How can we come together and say justice in all of its forms is important, and we must equally advocate for them together?
We need to form a more perfect union.
Oh, wow. That's a novel idea.
It is both distributive and distributive.
Yeah.
But not prohibitive. Is it prohibitive?
But before you, can you wait just 1 second? I have one more question. I don't want you to start playing that yet. I have
You're
a question.
touching the ukulele.
I am, because I just want you to stop for a second.
Wash your hands
You're
when you're
distracting me. Okay, I have a question for the three of you. You were talking earlier on in the podcast about the faith leaders and speaking and their people following them. I am sitting at the table with 3 pretty big faith leaders in the Christian community. And I am very curious to hear what you think your responsibility is, or what you are doing to speak into this time and to make a difference among the people that listen to you or follow you. Because you all have a mouthpiece.
Writing ill-conceived blog posts.
No, I mean, certainly you've thought about that. Certainly you've
Yeah.
laid in bed at night
Yeah.
and thought, what is my responsibility during this time? I would love to know what the answer to that question is and what you feel like you...
I try to give a platform to people like Theon Hill.
That's one thing for
And
sure.
other people
Yeah.
that, I mean, the Christian media enterprise prefers celebrity, to depth and diversity.
And that's true of media in general.
And media in general, and Christian media as well. So, I mean, if I have a platform, I try to use it to get, minority voices, more interesting voices, more,
Or silent
outsider voices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at least speaking for me and Phil, we don't run large institutions of Christian faith, right? We're not running churches
You are an institution of Christian
in and of
faith.
myself,
Yeah.
right? As I roll my
Like
eyes.
Jay-Z said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman.
So, it's one thing if you're leading an organization and have a hierarchy of authority and all that to do, but we don't have that. We have our voices, we have our writing, we have our podcasts, we have those kinds of things. So I think it's partly equipping other believers with the articulation of ideas rooted in Scripture and thoughtfully and prayerfully composed so that they have the tools to go out and have those conversations and engage their neighbors and think and challenge their own ideas. Theon, you have an additional capacity because you are involved in an institution and you have a role there. So beyond helping roommates reconcile over their differences on the refugee immigration issue, like how do you see your role at Wheaton College in all this?
Yeah, so it could be both to Wheaton College locally, but also to the Wheaton College constituency. So that's going to involve in the classroom and in my speeches that I give both locally and around the nations, forcing people to think critically about these issues, being willing to say uncomfortable things, but also bearing the burden of being willing to talk to people. I made a decision earlier this academic or school year that I was going to respond to every bit of negative feedback that I received.
Wow.
And so that's been
That's
something
big.
that I've been trying this year. And anytime someone sends me a negative message, as long as it's not like ludicrous, I'll respond, thank you, brother, thank you, sister, for that message. Here's why I said what I said, and here's my response. And I try to say it in a loving way that allows dialogue to take place. And that's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my year, was trying to have those dialogues.
Well, I admire that. I'm wondering, is that sustainable?
It depends on how much I get.
Well, yeah, that's
yeah.
it. I mean, the time factor, because I get wonderfully encouraging messages from time to time, and I also get highly critical ones.
Yeah.
And I've realized occasionally I will respond to some of those
Right.
if I feel like there's even a spirit of humility or openness in
Exactly.
that. But frankly, an awful lot of them,
Right.
it's like I'm going to bury so much time into responding to this person, and I have 3 kids and a wife and
course.
a life beyond this. I don't have time for all that. So
And so, I mean, someone called me a charlatan in a message not too long ago, and I enjoyed that. I had to look up the word and everything. But that wasn't a
That's
message I felt
just
the need to
someone
respond.
from Charlotte.
Exactly, of course. I didn't feel the need to respond to that message.
Yeah, okay.
You're not looking for dialogue, but for someone's like, how can you believe this? Well, thank you for asking,
all right,
brother, sister.
I admire that. Good for you.
Yeah. All right.
yeah.
I got to wrap it up. But thanks for being on. It
If
was
people
awesome.
wanted
Hey,
you
you
to
are
come
so
and
not stopping.
I know. If people wanted to get in touch with you to come and speak somewhere,
Or if they have a criticism of what he said on this podcast and would like to
Exactly.
start a dialogue.
how do they get in touch with you?
My email address is Theon, Theon, .hill@wheaton.edu.
And you'll come and speak wherever?
Hey, let's
Goodness,
go.
do you have any idea how many people listen to this podcast?
I do know. I see y'all viewership.
Okay.
Y'all gonna have me in Alaska.
Tell your wife you might be distracted for the next week.
Hey, Theon! Glad that you could be on our show. Hey, ho, and hey, Theon! I'm so sorry that now it's time to go. Oh, we're at the end of the show because race is the place. It's not just the color of your face. It shouldn't affect the Church of Christ. Reconciliation is nice, so thanks, Theon, for coming on and keep up the fight in the day or whether you get emails at night, and keep being our brother in Christ. All right, and come back again, okay?
Amen. Thank
Will you come back again?
I will
Please.
always.
Okay, you're right
Soon.
down the street.
Exactly.
I know, you can't afford not to. If you want to support the podcast so we can pay Theon Hill's gas bill for his car driving 5 minutes up the road, go to patreon.com/Phil Vischer, and you can support us, and you'll get, unfortunately, little in return except the continuing of the podcast. Thanks, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.
The Phil Vischer Podcast is produced by Phil Vischer Enterprises and recorded live at Jellyfish Lab Studios. This episode was edited by Jason Rugg and was fact-checked by absolutely no one. For more information, go to philvischer.com.